And I would like to introduce our first speaker, Sarah Davis. Sarah is the Associate Director for the Rocky Mountain Public Health Training Center. Also presenting with Sarah today are Emily Mirza and Autumn Pelton. So Sarah, I will turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Brooke. Appreciate it. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us here and for welcoming us as part of your conference. So excited to be part of the virtual engagement this morning. So as those of you who have led meetings on Zoom know, you often have multiple screens up and are trying to do many different things at once. So I'll appreciate your grace and understanding as I switch between a few different views here. So first of all, thanks for engaging in the poll, and that's really helpful to know how folks are engaging or wanting to engage more with their communities. So what we saw there were a lot of you, more than half of you are working with coalitions, and that's a key way to engage with community needs assessments, another way, as well as some QI efforts. And some of you have advisory boards and some other ways in which you're looking to engage with communities. So if you've checked other, I'd like to invite you to drop into the chat what some of those other ways are that you're looking to engage with your community. And as we get started, I want to honor and acknowledge that where I'm sitting right now, which is in Denver, Colorado, is on the traditional territories and ancestral homelands of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Ute nations, and that they are the original stewards of these lands. And that with this land acknowledgement, I really want to celebrate the many contributions of Native peoples to the fields of medicine, mathematics, government, arts, literature, and so much more. I want to recognize the sophisticated and intricate knowledge system that Indigenous peoples have developed in relationship to their lands, and recognize and affirm the ties that these nations have to their traditional homelands and to the many Indigenous people who still thrive in this place, alive and strong. I also want to acknowledge the painful history of ill treatment and forced removal that has had a profoundly negative impact on Native nations. I respect the many diverse Indigenous people still connected to this land. I want to honor them and thank the Indigenous ancestors of this place. So you'll be hearing not only from me today, but also from Emily and Autumn, and we hope that you'll get to hear from each other as well, so through the chat. So thanks again for sharing through the poll the various ways that you're involved with engaging with your community, and hope that you'll continue to start to share through the chat as well, so that we can have a nice rich conversation with each other this morning or this afternoon. So as I mentioned, I'm Sarah Davis. I'm the Associate Director for the Rocky Mountain Public Health Training Center. I'm based in Denver here at the Colorado School of Public Health, but the training center serves a 6-state region, which includes South Dakota, along with North Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, and Utah. We provide primarily distance-based training. So some of you may be familiar with some of those distance-based trainings for folks who are working on public health issues throughout the region. And my community engagement experience really started when I was working on tobacco control issues for the American Lung Association. I was the chair of the Smoke-Free Denver campaign and part of the statewide smoke-free law effort, and went on to work with advocates in Nevada who are still working towards smoke-free casinos. So in the policy arena, community engagement is critical to success. We know that policies don't get passed because organizations are in favor of them. They get passed when communities come together behind them. So Autumn, let me pass it to you. Tell us who you are and where you are here in Colorado.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today and for giving us the opportunity to be a part of your meeting today. I'm Autumn Pelton, the Communities That Cares coordinator out here in Cheyenne County, Colorado. So like as Sarah is sharing, I'm a little tiny dot, very eastern side of Colorado, very small, very flat. We don't see the mountains as they are 140 miles away. So if you think of Colorado as beautiful mountains, colorful state, it's not where I'm at. We are flat, we are farming. We probably have more cows than people in our county. So that's how small we are out here. I went to college for a little while and came back to the rural life to raise my family because I love rural life and I probably will never leave it. I was a healthcare provider. I'm now the Communities That Cares coordinator here, which I started in September of 2020, which, as all of you remember, was the pandemic. Why did I start community engagement during a pandemic? I will still never understand why I made that move. That was probably not the best time to do that. But it was fun and I got to be creative. And being a part of a rural area means that community is everything, and engaging and motivating your community is going to be your key element in your prevention effort successes. So good luck to you all in your community engagement.
All right, let's pass it over to you, Emily.
Hi, thanks everyone for having us today. My name's Emily Mirza and I live and work in Gunnison, Colorado. So that is in the mountains. It's nestled, it's a little ski town in the mountains. And I moved out here from the East Coast chasing the snow to ski. And I've been working in public health for about the past 10 years and about the past 7 doing a lot of youth programming and youth engagement work. And then the last few, I facilitate a community coalition. So it utilizes the Communities That Care model. And I'm their community mobilizer. So we do substance use prevention and mental health promotion for 6th through 12th graders in our community and their parents. And so we have several programs that live under our coalition that we're moving forward. And I would say my unofficial job is to build and maintain community relationships to keep engagement up. And I think one of the best pieces and why I love this work, because it's really work with the community, not for the community, which is really powerful to move efforts forward.
Great, thank you both. So wanted to invite Autumn and Emily here as part of the conversation this morning to really think about and share some stories from on the ground of what community engaging looks like in different areas and dealing with some of the challenges that can come up. So encourage you throughout this presentation to be thinking about why community engagement is important to you. Why is this a priority to work with and engage the communities where you are? So we want to start off by thinking about what we chose to get involved with personally and why we chose those particular things to get involved with. So for this next exercise, I'm going to ask you to think about a group that you chose to get involved with, or you can think about a group that you were involved with that you stopped being involved with, that you chose not to continue to be involved with. And this could be a coalition, a committee, a political cause, a club, anything. So I am dropping some instructions into the chat, and if you click on the link there, that will take you to a Padlet. And let me switch over and show the Padlet that we're headed to. And some of you may have used Padlet before. This is what it looks like. So what we'll have everyone do is once you click on the link in the chat, you will click on one of these 4 questions, or you can answer more than one if you'd like, for why did you decide to get involved with that particular group? Why did you stay involved? Or why did you stop being involved with a particular group? So to add a note under any of these, you just click on the plus underneath that column, type your note. We can see it populating already. So let's take a minute to add our thoughts in about why we chose to get involved with a particular group or chose not to get involved or stay involved. Excellent. Yeah, and feel free to drop it into the chat if for any reason you're having trouble with the Padlet link. Thanks, Nicole. All right, so feel free to keep on adding to the list. We've got a good list going here. I'm going to switch back over for a second. And we started off with a self-reflection because sometimes it's easy for us to think about community as this other being. When we're trying to engage the community, it's helpful to realize that we're also part of the community. So depending on the issue or the situation, someone at some point has wanted us to get involved with something. So it can be helpful to reflect on the things that caused us to say yes to being involved or to staying involved, or the reasons why we chose not to engage with a particular piece. So let's look back at what we have on our list. And I think that you have the Padlet up in front of you. So most of you can see that. So reasons why folks chose to get involved: it was an issue that they were interested in, or they believed in the mission. They had a personal alignment with the topic. So they're interested in the issue. They saw a need. They wanted to serve the public. They wanted to make a difference. Things that kept people involved is that they felt like they were a valuable part of the team. It was aligned with the type of work that they do. They felt like they were making a difference. They could see some progress happening. They knew that their knowledge and expertise were helpful to the group. They were affected personally, and they wanted to contribute in helping others. Then if we look at the flip side of why folks chose not to get involved, it felt like too big of an ask or too complicated, or they didn't have time. The time commitment was too much. It didn't align with their priorities. They had other priorities that were more important. And then there's some frustration about maybe folks who were involved and then stopped being involved at some point because it felt disorganized, or nothing was happening. There were personality challenges or challenges with the leadership, power struggles, pandemic. Yeah, that could probably be starred, right? Lack of direction. Didn't really feel like what I had to contribute was, that it wasn't taking advantage of my skill set. So when we think about community engagement, one lens that we can look through is thinking about tuning our dials to radio station WIIFM. And many of you know what that stands for. What's in it for me? So as we think about some of those common themes that showed up on our Padlet around our reasons for engaging or disengaging, we found that we chose to engage with efforts that were a good use of our time or talents. So it was relevant, it was interesting, it aligned with our mission or passion, it used our time well. We knew that we had something to offer to the group. Another theme that came up was that we got some benefit out of it. And sometimes this shows up a lot in the groups where we ask this question of where folks really get something positive out of participating. And so sometimes that's a good feeling. Sometimes that is personal satisfaction. Sometimes it's professional or social connections, access to knowledge or skill building. It may help you advance professionally. Maybe you're learning new skills. The end result impacts you personally. And sometimes there are incentives that help us participate, like getting paid or having food or childcare, some acknowledgement or recognition. So there's some benefit to the individuals who are part of something. And then the third one that came up, and it came up in both columns, right? It came up of, this is why I kept participating, is that my voice mattered. It mattered that I was there. And it came up as reasons why we chose to disengage with the group, that we felt like there were personality conflicts, we weren't being listened to, it wasn't well run, and that we weren't involved, that it didn't matter that we were involved with this particular group. So it didn't take advantage of our skill set. Maybe we didn't feel like we had power in the group. So let's keep these in mind, and we're going to dive into some strategies to support each one of those different themes. So some of the comments that came up were about how well we used people's time. And this often shows up in the reasons why folks disengaged, is that they didn't feel like meetings were well run, that they weren't using their time very well. So an effective meeting has a clear purpose. Everyone coming to the meeting can answer the question, why are we meeting today? A great meeting has a good agenda that's designed to achieve the meeting's purpose, and it uses people's time well. And really, we want to design an agenda that uses multiple different strategies and different ways to engage participants. So that can include full group discussion, but it can also include small group discussion or individual reflection time or creative activities that make it easy for participants to contribute their talents. And in order to be effective, a meeting also needs to be inclusive. So whether it's the location, the physical location that we choose to hold our meeting in, the way we greet people when they come to the meeting, whether it's on Zoom or in person, the materials we provide or the orientation we provide to participants ahead of time so that they're prepared to engage, especially new folks coming into a group. People will be more likely to engage if they feel like they belong in the group. And if you're interested in diving into any of these strategies, I'd encourage you to check out the Designing Effective Meetings virtual workshop. We offer it every quarter through the Rocky Mountain Public Health Training Center, and I'll drop the link in the chat if that's something that would be of interest to you or other folks that you work with your meeting planning activities. So when we think about how to engage people, whether it's in our coalitions or our advisory boards or as participants in our community assessments, there are some common challenges that can come up, especially when we're dealing with rural areas. And Colorado and South Dakota and really all of the 6 states that we work with in the Rocky Mountain region have a lot of rural areas. So I want to invite Emily and then Autumn to chime in here and share some strategies that they've found to be effective around community engagement, specifically in rural communities.
Thanks, Sarah. I'll start. So I'll speak to this first one, and it's a struggle we've had in our community where it's the same people showing up to all the same meetings, and they have multiple hats on at that meeting, or they're showing up at different meetings with different hats on, and there's burnout, and it's exhausting for those of us who are showing up. And I'm sure that's something that you all are facing as well in rural communities. And a strategy we've started to utilize in the past 5 years is to sort of streamline our efforts. So we're not duplicating efforts, but we're partnering better. And we are aligning our strategic goals across all these different coalitions and work groups that are happening in the community. And the way we've been successful at doing that is we have an overarching health coalition in our community that has a pulse on what's going on. And we've worked to align strategic plans and to not work in silos. And an example of this is there are a lot of youth-facing efforts identified under this Health Coalition's plan. And instead of creating another group to meet who wants to support young people and have healthy young people and reduce substance use and increase mental health for them, the coalition I facilitate has stepped up to move forward those efforts. So we're not creating another group, so we're not duplicating efforts, and so we can work in partnership and align our goals, and we're not asking all the same folks in our coalition to join another work group to move those efforts forward. So that's been a successful way to sort of reduce burnout in that way. Another group that's doing that is our prevention, treatment, and recovery group, and they do our opioid work and our harm reduction work primarily for adults. So they've stepped up to move forward all the adult-facing efforts and work in partnership with the overarching health coalition. We also utilize shared leadership. So in that group, we have a leadership board of key stakeholders in the community, from the health system, from the municipalities, from nonprofits, and they work as a shared leadership board for all of our different groups. And this has just really helped to align our efforts and not duplicate things. And then one other piece I wanted to speak to is this, I hear that snowstorm thing. I live in a snowy community all winter. And also it's really interesting, pre-COVID, we had in-person meetings, and then we moved into COVID, and then everything went virtual, and now we're coming out of that. And we are in this, I'm finding in our community, we're in this space where we're large geographically, but our population is small. And how do we accommodate folks who want to show up virtually and for those who want to show up in person? So we've been doing a lot of work to create more hybrid meetings, which I know sounds from a facilitator standpoint like a lot of work. It is more work, but I have been successful at engaging more folks that way. I would say a few key tips are, we purchased an owl, so maybe talk to your funders. It's a great technical tool to help with the video capabilities and the sound, to have those meetings in person and virtual. And then just leaning on a team. I always have a tech person there to help manage the chat. If I'm engaged in chatting with someone in person, they can pull in the people who are there virtually. And I always have a note taker. So I know it sounds like more work, but it has been successful, and it does help get folks to the table who might not come in person or who might not show up in Zoom.
Awesome. I'm just gonna like second everything that Emily just said because that was amazing. So I can't see everyone, but if you just want to like raise your hand if you feel like you're in a small area or an area where you are constantly talking to the same 10 to 15 people, like Emily said, like show your hands. I know there's people out there. Yes. Everyone is always talking to the same 10 or 15 people, and those same 10 or 15 people, what I've done in our community is those same 10 to 15 people are always connected with every other sector in your community. Use that to your advantage and have them have specific tasks or responsibilities to take back to their groups or their organizations, and their organizations will become your task forces for your coalition. So we, for example, have the 4-H extension, and there are youth engagement work group, and they're really focused on the positive youth development aspect and how to bring adult mentors to youth, and how do we do this efficiently and to the best of our youth's ability. And they're a really good group to tag in with here in our area. In fact, last night I was part of the 4-H Parent Appreciation Night, and we did a little mini positive youth development training and promotion and talked about how we can bring this back into our 4-H meetings, because we're also geographically really spaced out, which I'm sure is the same in South Dakota. Everyone is very far apart. We try to do our best to align our efforts, and it's hard. But as Emily said, find your leadership group, work with them about how to bring everybody together and give people tasks and responsibilities, because they'll show up more if they know that they're needed. This last comment here, I invite people to meetings, but they don't show up. Yes, all the time. We are busy. In fact, this entire week, I will not be home before 7:30 at all, because we have kids and we have lives and we have jobs on top of everything else that we're involved with our community. So creating more meetings isn't always the best solution because people don't have time to meet. So go where they're at. Go to where those organizations are meeting, find when they're having meetings, and go to them and ask them if you can help them. A little give and take situation is always really important, I feel, in a rural area, and it's going to get you a lot further because you're going to be building those connections. You're going to be building those relationships that you'll need to continue the work forward. So second to everything Emily said, rural networking is hard, but it can be done, and find your leadership group and do the best that you possibly can with your relationship building, because that's going to get you really far.
Awesome. Thank you both. We'd love to hear from some of you in the chat about, you just heard a bunch of different strategies and ideas of what Emily and Autumn have found to work in their smaller communities. Would love to hear from those of you, especially who are in those small rural communities. What's working for you to engage partners and to engage community members? So drop some ideas in the chat, because I know others would love to hear from you. And while you're generating those ideas in the chat, we talked a little bit about structure and how you might think about structuring your meeting so that you are using people's time well. Love what Autumn said about maybe it's not having another meeting, maybe it's going to existing meetings. Both Emily and Autumn talked about really strategizing with other groups who are in the community to think about how to be strategic about an overarching coalition, for example, and then task force that are focused on different focus areas, rather than trying to have 6 different coalitions focused on different areas. So talked a little bit about structure and how to make sure that we're using people's time well. Let's shift a little bit and talk about some strategies that tap into the benefit to individuals from being engaged in your effort. And I love seeing these ideas that are coming into the chat. So really using the peer network of asking folks to bring another person with them. So that usually brings somebody new. Having a neutral entity or structure, Charlene mentioned. So Charlene, feel free to add some more about that in the chat if you'd like. So sometimes we know, especially in small communities, but in large communities as well, you know, organizations have their own power structures and their own relationships and dynamics. And so it may be that having a neutral party sort of lead the coalition or serve as a backbone for a coalition or convener may be helpful. So asking champions to invite others, making it easy for them by providing a draft email or invite script, using that personal invite. I think somebody earlier, yeah, Sarah mentioned one-on-one meetings, and then identifying what those shared goals are. So Emily mentioned that as well, of really finding out where the alignment is. And Autumn talked about that mutually beneficial relationship of how can we each help each other out when we're looking at other partner organizations. So thanks for generating some of those ideas. So I'm going to put a document in the chat here in just a second as we think about how to look at who's currently involved in your community engagement efforts and who you wish was involved. So let me pop this into the chat here. And this will be a document that you can download and save and use if you find it to be helpful. We'll spend a couple minutes looking at it together as a group. So this chart, which you'll see a little snapshot of it on the screen, helps us look at who we want to have involved. So who do we want to hear from in our community assessment? Whose voices and expertise do we want as part of our advisory board? Who do we feel like we're currently missing from our coalition efforts? And this chart helps us think about, for those individuals or for those groups or partners, what's in it for them? What do we think might be in it for them, the WIIFM, for those individuals or groups? What's in it for them to be involved? How might they benefit? And the flip side of that, what are the barriers or the challenges to those individuals or groups being involved? So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes right now. I'm going to play a little music for us. So invite you to go ahead and open up that worksheet and think about how you might fill it out. So picture a particular effort that you're involved with, a coalition, a community assessment that you're looking to have greater engagement with. And think about that first column especially. Who are some of the individuals or groups that you would like to engage with more? take another minute and a half and then come back together and share some of our examples. All right, so hopefully that got some ideas percolating for you. Would love to have some folks chat in. What was one of the groups or partners who you want to engage with more? So go ahead and add that into the chat. One group or partner you want to engage with more. And while you start to do that, Emily, let me turn to you to see if you could share an example of a group or partner who you were interested in engaging and how you went about doing that.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Our coalition works primarily, like I said, with 6th through 12th graders and their parents, and we realize we can't do the work in the community without having them a part of our coalition. And this last year, we've worked to engage more parents as a part of our work and identify that as a need to really, really understand what parents need and have them be a part of our process. And that might be inviting them to our table, or like Autumn was talking about, showing up to the different tables they're at. One success we've had is we have a very, very, very part-time paid position. So she does 5 to 10 hours a week, and we wrote into one of our coalition grants, so it's funded. And she is a community advocate or a community champion. I did see that come up in the chat that other folks are using community champions, which is awesome. And she's out in the community, and she has the ability to connect with parents in a different way than I do as the coalition facilitator. But she's a parent herself of 2 high schoolers. So she goes out and she does a lot of chatting with folks in the community, educating them on our work, learning about what empowers other people, listening to their stories, asking them to share with her. She has what she calls, because we live in a ski town, her chairlift chat. So think of like an elevator pitch, but a chairlift. Our longest chairlift is 7 minutes. And she says she oftentimes sits on a chairlift with someone and chats about our work in the community. And engages them. And then if it feels right and they want to know a little bit more, she works with me to set a one-on-one meeting up. And I saw that come up in the chat too. So one-on-one meetings are great because you can really learn from other community members their why and why they might be interested in their work, and then fit them in where it's appropriate. Maybe they want to be a part of the coalition. Maybe they're interested in a certain area and want to show up to a subgroup or a work group or an action group. So that's been really successful. The other thing she does, like Autumn was talking about, is she goes to different tables. So she's a part of the PTA and brings our voice to PTA and then brings their needs back to our table. So she's just out there in the community, and we love her chairlift chat. It's one of my favorite things. When she shared that with me, I was like, this is awesome. I need to share this with other people.
Oh, excellent. Thanks, Emily. So some ideas coming in through the chat about different groups that some of you are looking to engage. So people who have no homes, people who are struggling with mental health. One thing I'm hearing there are that we're looking, this is what Emily said as well, looking to engage folks who are perhaps recipients of the services or who are firsthand experiencing the challenges that we're trying to directly address. So making sure they're part of that. Academic institutions, churches, substance abuse treatment centers. So I'd love to shift a little bit for those of you who started to think about the barriers. What are some of the barriers for any of these individuals or these groups of individuals for getting involved? So go ahead and drop some of your barriers into the chat. And Autumn and Emily, while folks are doing that, what have you run into in terms of struggles that you've had with a particular partner or a group that you've hoped to engage, but you've really run up against some barriers? Can one of you share about that?
I'm laughing at the first one someone put in male engagement, but we are always like, where are the dads? So I don't necessarily know if I have a great answer, but I feel that we have a lot of, when I'm thinking of parents and professionals in the community, a lot of women involved, and we're always like, where are the dads? We need that voice. And we've talked about having showing up to like where they go to lunch and just doing some education or networking with them. And really, when we're out in the community, really having like targeted asks to the dads to show up, because their voice is important. I don't know, Autumn, if you have any other ones, but that one we struggle with.
Yes, I think engagement is very hard. In fact, sometimes it's hard for me to even get my husband there, and like this is my job. So I mean, male engagement is hard, and I don't exactly know. I think you really have to understand their time and commitment and everything that they sacrifice to be there. Especially from a rural area. Their mindset is very much so, take care of my family, take care of my family. Doesn't matter how many hours you work. And I'm sure that's everywhere actually. So it is very hard to find the time to engage them. We actually have a very successful fourth grade class of dads. And I don't know if it's because that class is entirely of boys. There's like 2 girls in that class. But those dads actually created and run flag football league. They created and run basketball camps and have like league games and everything like that for 1st through 6th grade. So I do think that when you find that they'll create it themselves, like they're very much so like they're not going to wait for anything to happen. They're going to make it happen. So just supporting them when that starts happening, I think is crucial. For example, we actually have a male teacher who is doing after school basketball skills camps for 5th and 6th graders to help build up, because when the pandemic hit, that group especially did not get a lot of skill set or have time. So they're behind is what I'm trying to say. So he's making time to make that work. And so what I've done is actually we approved to actually have a incentive or appreciation. So a thank you letter, and then like his favorite candy and different things like that, just to say thank you for taking the time to do this, because it's hard on anyone. But I feel as though male engagement is super hard to get and then to keep. So
yeah. Thanks for sharing those examples. And Shelby has clearly been thinking about what these challenges are: money, time, distance, transportation, childcare, location, lack of PTO or work flexibility. Great things to keep in mind. So for those of us who may be in salaried positions or in professional settings where we're able to go to meetings at lunchtime, or we have a flexible schedule, we may not think of what does this mean for someone who is on the clock. When is the time that I can connect with them? So thinking about it always from the individuals or the partners who you're trying to recruit, their perspective, what's in it for them, what are their competing challenges, and then looking for the bright spots and building off of what's working. So Autumn mentioned that 4th grade class where the dads are really involved. So what's working there, and how might we be able to build off of that in other areas? So hopefully this worksheet is something that's a helpful thinking tool for you or other partners as you think about who you want to engage and what might be the benefit. And sometimes we need to push ourselves beyond what's comfortable or how we typically do things. And I think we've already been talking about that. Emily and Amber have, and you've been sharing it in the chat. Thinking about what else we could be doing besides just inviting folks to our meetings. So making sure that we're educating ourselves on the community, which is especially important for those of us who are working in multiple communities and we don't live in all of those. So making sure that we're aware of the community, the dynamics in the community, the experiences of different groups within that community is really important. As is approaching the work that we do with humility. So recognizing that there may be issues of trust that we will have to work to overcome. So we have, I think, probably many of us could call upon an example of when an organization has lost trust in the community. I think that often happens when an organization has funding for a program or for a coalition or for some community engagement work. They're really engaged and involved with the community for a period of time. The grant goes away or the funding focus changes. And to the community members, it can feel like some trust was broken. And so you parachuted in and then you were out as soon as the grant was gone. So even if we weren't part personally of those efforts, we may need to overcome some previous or historical mistrust within the community. So love the ideas that have been coming up around the one-to-one and really listening, those strategies of listening and learning. So we're going to end by talking about the third strategy around how we make sure that folks know that their voice matters and the ways in which we can honor and engage the voices of our community. So in that facilitation and barriers activity on the Padlet that we did at the beginning, some of you said that the reason you stopped being involved is that you didn't feel like your voice mattered, or that the group wasn't, that they weren't listening to everybody who was part of it, or was being driven by one or more folks. And you may have been left wondering, why do you want me here? Am I just here to help you meet your goals, or are we working on something together? So this graphic, some of you may have seen something similar. This is based off of the public participation spectrum. And it shows a spectrum of ways in which the community might be involved in an issue. And in just a minute, we're going to use the annotate tool to reflect on how we're currently engaging with the community. So at one end of the spectrum, you see inform. This is where we're providing information to the community. And this might be entirely appropriate. For example, if there is a lice outbreak at my daughter's school, I just want to be informed. I don't need to collaborate about it. I just want you to let me know. What do I need to do? As we move further down the spectrum, we have consulting. We're seeking some input. We're asking for some feedback or for some ideas. Involving, we're really asking for and considering the concerns, desires, priorities of the community. So we're asking them what's important to you. We're really seeking to understand that, and that we're then going to use that input and those priorities, concerns, desires to drive what we do next and influence the decisions that are made. Collaboration, we're working to partner together to identify options together and preferred solutions as a partnership. So we're looking for advice. We're looking to co-create the solutions with community members. And we're going to incorporate these recommendations into the decisions that are made, that really those solutions start to be co-created. And then empower, and I'll recognize and own that this is a downfall of this particular spectrum, is that it's still very much rooted as we have the power and we're going to give it to you, community, when we know that community members and partners come with their own power. But this is really about who has the ability to make the final decisions. Is it the community that makes the final decisions, that implements and supports, and that any of our organizations are the implementers and the supporters and the machine that helps it happen, those decisions that are made by the community? So I'd like you to think about how you are currently engaged with your community. And so we're going to annotate, and if this is new to you, some quick instructions on how to do this. If you go to the top of your Zoom screen where it says that you're viewing my screen, next to that, you'll see view options. There'll be a drop down and you will click annotate. And then you're going to click stamp, and you can pick any shape that you want, but don't click yet. I'm going to paste those instructions in the chat just so that you can easily see them. Oh, and Brooke has just let me know that I think that I'm sharing my screen, but are you seeing my screen right now?
We are not, Sarah.
No. All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. I can see my screen. All right, so just quickly, I want to back up just a minute and I'm happy to send this through Brooke afterwards so that folks have a copy of the slides and can see this. This is the public participation spectrum where we see inform, consult, involve, all the way to collaborate and empower. There's no one right or wrong way. Different situations call for different types of participation and involvement. So I want you to think about along this spectrum, how are you currently engaging with your community? So here are the instructions to annotate. Let me put these in the chat for you as well. There we go. Okay. So on this next screen, I'd like to have you, and you'll pick whichever stamp you'd like. I'd like to have you in this orange box towards the bottom. I'd like to have you put a stamp in the spot where you currently fall in terms of how you are currently engaging your community. So go ahead and put a stamp, and it may be, if you're thinking about more than one effort, maybe you have stamps in a couple different spots. And again, there's not one right or wrong way. This is an opportunity to reflect on what our current practices are and think about what would help us meet our goals. Excellent. Annotate's one of my favorite tools. So this is great to see where different folks are falling along the spectrum. And you'll see we do have a full spectrum. So a couple things I want to mention about this as we wrap up is there's not one right or wrong way. One key piece is to make sure that we're really transparent about the ways in which we're engaging. I think sometimes we say we're collaborating with the community, and actually we're consulting with them. We're asking for some input, and then we're going to take that input and make some decisions. So that can end up feeling inauthentic to community members. And so if our goal is to truly co-create some solutions, which encourages high levels of engagement, then this can push us to think about what do we need to do to truly partner and collaborate. When is it appropriate that we're really looking to have the community have that final decision-making power? All right, thank you. I'm going to clear our annotations. And we'll move into some summary here. So at the heart of what we've talked about is how we tune our dial to WIIFM. We talked through some strategies of how to capitalize on things that are those facilitators of engagement, using people's time and talents well, making sure that there's a benefit to them for participating, and making sure that their voice does matter, that we're seeking the ways to involve them in the maximum appropriate way. So I would like to have Emily and Autumn close this out with a top tip or two for successful community engagement.
I'll go first. I actually have 3 tips. Number 1, know your community. Know your community in and out, know what's going on, and try to be part if you can. 2, engagement is a way of life. It doesn't clock in and out when you're with your job. You're going to see people at the grocery store. You're going to see people at games. Engagement's a way of life. So embrace it and let it be a part of you. Building trust takes time. So trust the process. For example, it has taken me 2 years since I started to get into the school system. So it takes time. Let it happen. It will happen. Just be confident in yourself and trust the process.
Awesome. I echo all of those things Autumn just shared, and I'll share a few different ones. If you can, compensate folks to show up if you want them to show up to your table. Like Sarah was talking about earlier, not everyone is paid through their work. And when we think about equity, if we can be better about compensating those who maybe work in the hospitality industry, or maybe they're a dad and work in construction, if we could compensate them to show up to our tables, that would be awesome. And that may be monetary, that might be food. Everyone comes for food. Kids love food, adults love food. Childcare, mileage reimbursement. We can think creatively of what that looks like, just so they know their time is valued. Just also what Sarah was talking about, that public participation spectrum. I think one thing I've learned is folks want to engage at different levels. So provide opportunities. Maybe they just want to be informed and know that they're just going to come to a meeting. They might not chat, but that's okay. They're just there to learn and listen. And then there are the folks on the other end who want shared decision making, who want some power to help make decisions and make change and provide opportunities for them to be on those action groups or those work items or their key leader boards, whatever that looks like in your community. And I think as a facilitator, I'm always like on the action end of things, but knowing sometimes people are just more happy on the other end, and that's okay. They're still a part of the work. And then what was the last one I wanted to share? It really echoes what Autumn said, but know your community and then also know your why. So know why you love doing this work and why you want to show up so you can show up authentically. And lastly, just take care of yourself, because when you're out in the community, it almost feels like your facilitator or your community engagement hat is always on. So take some time for yourself and your family.
Fantastic. So would love to invite, as we close, for any of you to offer your own tips. Again, I know there's a lot of wisdom within this group as well. So would love to close us out by having you chat in any final tips that you all have. Encourage you to check out the Rocky Mountain Public Health Training Center, either for yourself or for others who you work with or coalition members. So we have several of our learning opportunities are really intended for a general community audience. So invite you to check out most of those free trainings. And the last announcement that I'll mention, because some of you might know, some students who are interested in receiving a stipend for some of the public health practice work that they're doing as part of their studies. So we do have some stipends available to support students throughout the region. So I want to make sure that folks know that that opportunity is available as well. I will turn it back over to you, Brooke. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. And I'm going to share my screen now so that everybody can see the QR code for the evaluation. And while we're doing that, I just like to reiterate some of the points that you made, Sarah and Emily and Autumn. Thank you for sharing your insights. I love that you're in rural communities. That really resonates with our state. Some fantastic strategies for engaging community members, looking at that duplication of efforts and people, and making sure we're not overburdening people with our ask to participate with our activities, and looking at accommodating both that virtual and in-person option. I think a lot of times we think it has to be either or. And I really love that partner analysis tool. Thank you for sharing that. Hopefully everyone had time to download that from the chat. I will include that when I send out the recording, so that if you didn't get that, you can download that and really put some thought into who you want to engage and why you want to engage them. And I loved those last few comments about bringing your passion to the table, because I do think, people, community members do see when we're not authentic. So thank you for sharing those insights. I didn't see any questions in the chat. However, we will open it up now in case there are questions. Remember, you need to unmute yourself in order to ask a question. So we'll just do that here for a couple minutes. Hopefully everybody can scan that QR code and do the evaluation too while we're opening it up for questions.
Brooke, it looks like Teresa's interested in knowing if the recording is going to be shared.
Yes, Teresa, it will. So if you registered, which if you're on the meeting today, you obviously registered. So I will send it out to everyone who registered for the Chronic Disease Partners meeting. And it will be located on the Good and Healthy SD page, along with the slides and the documents that were shared. Emily, can you say again what the video tool you use for virtual meetings is?
Yeah, it's called an OWL, just OWL. You can buy them off of Amazon or like a office supply place, and it looks like a little owl, but it has like a round camera on the top, and then the speaker is all the way on the bottom. So you could set it in the middle of the table and then have your in-person folks around it, and then the camera moves to whomever is talking. So it makes it really easy to facilitate those combination meetings of in-person and virtual.
Thank you for sharing that, Emily. I don't see any other questions in the chat, and apparently people are shy and don't want to come on and ask questions, Sarah.
Great. Well, thanks, everybody. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, everyone. And next, I would like to invite Kylie Hump, the administrator of the Office of Disease Prevention and Health Promotion, to introduce our next speaker. Kylie, while you are doing that, I am going to launch the first poll that Sandy has put together.
Great, thanks, Brooke, and thanks, Sarah. Good to see you again, and thank you to you and the Rocky Mountain Public Health Training Center for being such a good partner of ours for several years. And thanks, Emily and Autumn, for sharing some really great insight for us. So off to a great start for our 2022 Chronic Disease Partners meeting. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kylie Hump. As Brooke said, I'm the administrator for the Office of Disease Prevention and Health Promotion with the South Dakota Department of Health. And I have the pleasure of introducing our next speaker for today. And so before I do that, just a few additional reminders, similar to our first presentation. If you think of any questions as Sandy's presenting, feel free to put those in the chat, and we'll address those at the end. But also, hopefully, we'll have a little bit of time if you want to jump on and ask your questions at the very end as well. We'll have a QR code evaluation for this presentation at the very end as well. So please make sure that you're prepared and can get that QR code and get that survey completed. So with that, I will introduce our next speaker. So Sandra Melstead is a public health consultant and founder of SLM Consulting, LLC, located in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Her company really focuses on improving public health by advancing health equity through prevention, multi-sector collaborations, and evidence-based decision-making. Dr. Melstead has worked in public health for over 16 years and works across local, state, regional, and national public health-driven organizations. Dr. Melstead holds a Master of Public Health from Tulane University and has a PhD in Health Sciences from the University of South Dakota. And I've had the pleasure of working with Sandra for many years, and she's a public health consultant with the Office of Disease Prevention and Health Promotion, and has been a great support to us for several years. And so looking forward to her presentation here today.
Thanks, Kylie. Hello, everyone. Great to see so many numbers on here today. Some of you are familiar faces and some of you are new, or I should say names. And so I, as Kylie mentioned, worked with chronic disease program now for many years, and wanted to give kudos to Sarah and her team from Rocky Mountain Public Health Training Center. I have an opportunity to work with them as well, and certainly brings home the really important piece of what I'm going to talk about, which is a public health 3.0 model, but certainly the community engagement is a strong component of that as well too. So certainly ties in really nicely to that as well. So I'm going to share my slides, and as Sarah said, I'm going to ask for a little grace. So make sure we get this all to work right here. So give me just a second. Okay, there we go. Can everybody see my slides? I get a yes from anybody.
Yes, looks good, Sandy.
Thank you. Okay, so before we move on, Brooke, could you close the poll and show it, or did you already do that? I don't see that.
I did close it. Let's see if I can pull it up. Can you see that now?
Yep, perfect. Okay, so I want to know who knows about Public Health 3.0, and so we're about split. So there's a portion of folks on this call right now who are getting a lot more familiar with this as part of the work that we're doing through the Office of Disease Prevention, Health Promotion, and Chronic Disease Prevention. But there's a fair number of you who haven't heard of it before, and so certainly be speaking to those of you to talk about how this model and framework was developed. And how you can look to apply that to some of the work that you're doing. And so, so thanks for taking that poll. Okay, so let me get my slides to work here. So just want to welcome everybody. I always try to have a slide that has all different languages. So whatever you recognize with, certainly welcome you to the virtual meeting today and to this presentation. And again, goes back to, I think, what Sarah and her team talked about and we'll talk about here is adapting and aligning with the community unique characteristics and needs as well. So I'm going to talk about some 5 kind of key areas and learning objectives. And so really talk about what the Public Health 3.0 model is and the ethos of it, help you to understand the components of it, understand how it has been utilized, giving you some examples, some opportunities to elevate it post-COVID. Well, certainly we're still in a pandemic, but there's been, this particular model was developed pre-COVID, and so there's been a lot of research and lessons learned since then. And then how you can apply some of this to your practice. So I'm just going to give you an overview of Public Health 3.0. And so really it's from this perspective, there's a lot of history tied to it. And so little history lesson for you here today. So Public Health 3.0 is really built on Public Health 1.0, which as you can see in your slide is really was in the late 1800s, really where our predecessors learned about the growth of knowledge and tools really around the value and impact of medicine in public health, certainly understanding then around uneven access to care in public health, and certainly how that plays a role within just the general health of a population. And using that information really helped move into Public Health 2.0, which was really framed by if anybody's ever saw it, which now would be pretty old, but I still think there's a lot of relevant information from the 1988 Institute of Medicine, the Future Public Health Report. And so that particular component was really emerged from the 20th century, and it's really shaped by that report. And certainly looking at ways that they learned a lot more about that systematic development of public health governmental agency capacity across the US. Certainly that is the foundation of a lot of our state entities with different structural components, but we certainly know our traditional public health workforce is employed through our public health departments and state health departments. And so this particular framework really focused on that, again, that traditional agency, but really calling to action to understand we need to have a core set of functions, public health standards, and those types of things to really inform the whole point of public health, right? We're here to improve population health and keep that community and the population we live, work, and learn with healthy. And then Public Health 3.0 really has emerged as they call it an emerging approach or renewed approach to public health to public health practice. And so really it's come out of the Affordable Care Act, certainly more recently the 2012 Institute of Medicine's for the Future Public Health Report. But they really center on the value of needing to engage multiple sectors and community partners to really generate that collective impact. And so for those of you, again, Sarah and her team had a great overview of that, how this really plays a role in that. And that's really how you can work collectively to make that impact, but certainly through the lens of the community and the population you're trying to serve. And then as no surprise, as we've learned a lot since the pandemic, things were in place before then, but improving social determinants of health and all those factors and issues that are impacting the people that we all serve and work with right now. And so that is really how Public Health 3.0 is evolved. Now this is, if you're a data source person, you see this is from 2016. So this emerged from work done through the Health and Human Services So really, this is from the prior Health and Human Services Secretary, Karen DeSalvo, Assistant Secretary. They launched this initiative. And so really what they did is lay out this vision for Public Health 3.0. They wanted to really characterize key components of it that were important to help elevate that multi-sector collaboration, improve the social determinants of health, and identify actions that would be really necessary to support this transformed approach, renewed approach to public health. And so what they did is identified 5 communities that they felt were aligned with that Public Health 3.0 vision, and really did listening sessions, essentially focus groups collecting a lot of qualitative information, but they made sure to have communities that had a diverse group of people working in public health and other fields. They also were selected for their general movement that aligned with Public Health 3.0 principles. Again, that multi-sector collaboration, have a strong local public health leader. Now, some of these are also local health departments. And obviously in South Dakota, we have a largely state infrastructure with that. But within the other elements where they were also using data and metrics, and they have funding. And so they went across the nation to understand what the components and really how that should be framed. And so really what they emerged from this, and I'll talk a little bit here moving on around what are the components, but is a roadmap. It's a roadmap for all of you on this call. It certainly was built around the framework around public health, government, and Department of Health, but we certainly know there's opportunity to engage and should apply this to all public health organizations, agencies, and everybody that's working collectively. But you're really focused on serving the communities. And so again, we know the communities should be at the table from the get-go, and how this approach can really foster that renewed approach to practice. Again, focusing on those upstream practices to address those underlying drivers of health and well-being. And so the true ethos of Public Health 3.0 is really identified from the report for the first time in history. Now, this is back in 2016, but this certainly does apply. Every person in America has truly equal opportunity to enjoy a long and, I should say, healthy life. And I think one thing to point out of that too is if any of you work in the equity lens, they really talk about equal, but we also want to look at that equitable opportunity as well. And so that's really kind of how Public Health 3.0 developed and what it's framed around. And so really what the content really looks at is, okay, so why do we need it? So we have this renewed approach that has emerged through the lessons learned history. So what is our need for public health? Well, we all work in public health. I think we know why we're here, but it's also important to kind of reinforce the need for it, especially tied to that Public Health 3.0 model. And so again, this is not news to any of you. It should not be, but we know the U.S. health crisis and the inequities and disparities cannot be solved by healthcare. We just know the research, there's a growing body of research. I myself do health equity, some health equity research, and there is, we know a lot of this is driven by those social determinants of health, kind of those root causes as well. And so while healthcare is a vital component of this, I think by now we should all know that it really takes a lot more than that to really improve the health of those populations and make everybody have that opportunity, right, to be healthy. So this is just a highlights overview and probably something similar that you've all seen, but this is just reinforcing how those health disparities are driven by those social and economic inequities. And so we have a lot of different components that are in there that are driven across things. We certainly have some structural issues that drive a lot of the inequities that foster into overall health and well-being, mortality, morbidity, life expectancy, things such as healthcare expenditures, health status, and certainly functional limitations. So there's a lot of things that play with this, but we certainly know a lot it comes down to those social economic factors, social determinants of health, and those root causes if we really want to move upstream. So then this is just to highlight where we're at right now. This is actually only 2020 data, so pulled this from the Kaiser Family Foundation, but again, probably nothing new to you, but this is really highlighting, I go back to why public health, why does it matter? So we are one of the wealthiest nation, or the wealthiest nation in the world, and we have some of the poorest health outcomes. And so that's certainly been elevated since COVID started. And so this is showing you your health consumption expenditures per capita from 2020 or the nearest year. And so these are neighboring or peer nations that have similar GDPs and gross domestic, dollar per capita dollar expenditures, not expenditures, but similar in wealth. And so you can see where the comparable country average is that the average country is spending about half of what the United States does. And we've known every one of these countries has increased their health expenditures since COVID started. However, we were still in the lead before that too. And so we certainly know that significant investments in healthcare, looking at those policy system, environmental changes are certainly important when we look at that lens. Again, if you paid attention to the news, or any of you on this call, our data wonks, life expectancy has dropped for the second year in a row. And again, that's largely due to the COVID pandemic. But this is data from the National Vital Statistics report, the most recent one I could find. And so I thought you'd find this interesting if you haven't looked at this. Is between 2019 and 2021, but you can see it's disaggregated by race. And so it's important to kind of look at that through that lens, as also by age. And so we can see the impact by race and by age, how that's really disproportionate by age and race as well. And so we certainly know in light of COVID, these inequities and disparities were in place before, but again, important to understand how that's been impacted ever since COVID started. And so just some kind of highlight why this matters. And I'm going to talk about what's in the model. So some literature that really highlights the importance of this Public Health 3.0 model. We look at research that talks about health consequences of stigma. Stigma certainly plays a role with social isolation, behavior responses, stress, certainly among those underserved and vulnerable populations. We know structural inequities certainly impact healthcare. We see that within an interplay of different levels of influence and factors with that. In that disparate impact of the pandemic on communities of color and low-income populations certainly emerged generational inequities, institutionalized a lot of where things were back in that Public Health 3.1.0 time, or even 2.0 time. And then, you know, we just some of the literature out there, we know we see employers of public health professionals struggle to prioritize health equity or even those social determinants of health in practice, kind of shaped around workforce capacity and leadership gaps. And so the reason I talk about this is all feeds into that Public Health 3.0 model and why we're promoting this as a framework that could help kind of move you forward. So that's just a little bit of why public health. Now I want to talk about what's actually involved in Public Health 3.0. And so this is Karen DeSalvo. She was the Assistant Secretary that I referred to earlier. So she's kind of been the author of this particular model. And so she actually works for Google. I think it's Google Health now. So she moved on from federal government, but she's really done some work since COVID started to really reflect on the Public Health 3.0 model and understand how we can continue to use that and move forward. But Karen DeSalvo and her co-author talked about it in the lens of addressing all drivers of health requires relying on government public health. And I highlight these key things in collaboration because I think we all know by now we can't do things alone. So with other sectors, because public health is what we do together as a society to ensure those conditions in which everyone can be healthy. And so that's really the framework that they use to kind of, the premise they use to kind of build and understand this Public Health 3.0 model. You may have seen this particular image. It's actually on the Good&Healthy website, the evidence-based strategy page, but this is really to highlight as they went about developing this Public Health 3.0 model, the different layers of prevention. And so we certainly know that traditional clinical prevention plays a role within that, and that we're seeing we also are seeing a transformation in the healthcare system towards one that would really be more of that collective impact, that community perspective. And so again, CDC developed this, conceptualized the integration of kind of those three components. So that traditional clinical prevention, the innovative clinical prevention, and the total population or community-wide prevention. And so when we look at Public Health 3.0, it really aligns with the number 2 and the number 3. So providing services outside of the clinical setting and implement interventions that reach whole populations. And so really that's where this model kind of aligns more with. And so now into the kind of the meat of it is what's involved in Public Health 3.0. And so it's really built around 5 key components. There's a lot of information in the reports that they have, and so certainly I'll share these resources with you. But there's really some 5 key components that they built around it back in 2016, but it's certainly still relevant now. So looking at strong leadership and workforce, foundational infrastructure, strategic partnerships, data analytics and metrics, and flexible and sustainable funding. So strong leadership and workforce. Really what they talk about from this lens is to have the chief health strategist in the community. And so public health leaders are really invited to embrace that role, and this may be not their role, and maybe they find that we need to engage somebody from the community to kind of help with that leadership role, which is certainly an important part of that community engagement perspective. And so the idea is that you're going to gather partners on board and really work on those efforts to build that leadership in that workforce. So really looking at, first of all, building a strong workforce really requires strengthening the skills and the knowledge to really adapt to those changing landscape of public health. So that might be looking at things to have shared learning. Maybe you can learn something from a partner. Maybe there's opportunities of skills that you can grow your expertise and involve local stakeholders. And so really looking for opportunities to exchange those skills. They really talk about cross-pollination of professional development, but really finding ways that to build that role of that chief health strategist, really informed by training, capacity building, a lot of what Sarah's group does at the Rocky Mountain Public Health Training Center too. So certainly a lot of opportunities to look within that. Leading with collective impact. Now, again, this is, again, if those who work in healthcare, that's certainly been a kind of a key phrase, certainly within your needs assessments perspective, but doing things together. So we can do things and have more impact if we have that collective drive and have the collective vision and things that we know that we want to do to really help drive that. And then thinking outside of the box. And so how can we think a little bit outside of our traditional norms, or maybe it's engaging these other community champions, things within that lens to kind of help elevate that local leadership in that workforce. And so it's really about making that community that chief driver strategist for that role. So that's really that perspective. Foundational infrastructure, really kind of three key areas they talk about in that. And so creating a mission-based collaborative infrastructure. And so this is really, as I mentioned, this was originally developed for health departments, but it's really around having the community engaged, really welcoming that community engagement, both formally and informally. So maybe that's having community advisory boards, means, really focusing not only on dissemination information to the communities, but also collecting information from the communities. And so really making that public health 3.0 values and include that information and requirements within an organization or infrastructure of a organization who may be doing this type of work. So it's really kind of building into the foundational piece with that. Focusing on equity and cultural competence, certainly is very, very important in this. So adopting that lens with the view of the community that you're working with. And so really looking at integration of those practices, not just an extra piece added on, but really institutionalizing that approach through training for staff. Maybe it's really looking at things within hiring practices. So it's really integrating that within the foundational infrastructure. And then looking at articulating foundational infrastructure in the public health brand. And this really looks at kind of selling it, marketing it to the community. So we want people to understand the value of this. And so you can use this model to really help communicate that to communities, that you can tailor to fit to local culture in the communities as well. But this might be an opportunity to also engage with business leaders, the business sector, who have more experience maybe with that marketing piece. But how can you use this as an opportunity to build those skills and build those foundational infrastructure to really sell or make this brand component around what you're trying to do with using this model and within your organization. Strategic partnerships. Again, this is, I think, one of the cornerstones, I think, of public health practice, certainly. But this is really centered on building structured cross-sector partnerships to guide initiatives and foster shared funding, services, governance, and collective action. And really looking at establishing backbone entities for strategic planning and funding. Sometimes that may be looking at a more neutral organization who can help kind of foster some of that. They could help convene, collect input from partners, mobilize funding. So there may be red tape with some of your agencies. So maybe it's finding those strategic partnerships that can support some of that work as well. And certainly an important part of that is making sure you have the public's trust to support some of that work. Cultivating new and existing relationships. Certainly, I think we talk a lot about non-traditional partnerships. And so finding those existing relationships that you can foster to elevate the work that you're doing, but also finding those new relationships or new partnerships that you can build. And as previous presenter said, it takes time. It just takes time and trust building, but it's an important part of it. And so really how you can help support each other through that lens. And then identify collective goals and defining values. And again, I think kind of back to what they talked about earlier, we want to make sure we're on the same page, we have the same vision, the same goals with that, and things that you can do to have alignment and work collectively to kind of move forward with that. And I think and interesting that I have those in the slides before, because I have the same thing in my notes, what's in it for me. And so really looking at how collectively through partnerships you can drive that work as well. Data analytics and metrics. This is certainly important and certainly evolved so much since the start of the pandemic, but really, really important as we move forward with this too around local data. This is more important, I think, more than ever, but I certainly know it's a challenge. It's a challenge to get some of this, and that's why this is really centered on that timely, reliable, granular, and actionable data. So as local as you can get it, you can have a better idea of really what's being impacted. And so we can get the information around a state, but if we look a little deeper, we might have a better idea what's going on in a community, a population, that disaggregation, that timely and granular data. Great, clear metrics. This is certainly something I talk a lot about more. I do within my work in health equity, but we need some consistent and clear metrics, and that may be within your organization that you can look through this lens or working with partners. But how are you measuring things? How are you collecting data on things? How are you doing it consistently and aligned so you can really use that information to understand if what you have in place is working or what's impacting certain populations. And so that's a really clear component that has emerged as a gap and needs to be addressed as well. Addressing current data gaps and access challenges. And again, this goes back to that county, that city level data. We know that certainly can be challenging, but the more that data can be made available at those local levels, perhaps having more of that raw de-identified data available in a timely fashion can help really drive some of that evidence to action too. The reality is we know that some of the data that we use in public health is old, right? So looking at different ways to kind of collect and address some of those data gaps. Supporting data sharing and analysis. So again, this has merged a lot. We know this is very important. We also know it can be challenging too, but the idea here is just to elevate opportunities to share data and to be able to work collectively to understand whoever you're working with, whatever populations you're working with, but finding ways to take some of that red tape out of there to better share data and really work collectively to address the issues. And then new types of data. So I think there's certainly been a lot merged since pandemic started, but look at things such as hospital ambulatory care records, health insurance claims, electronic health records.
Yes, but then Lindsay was like, you're there. Do you want to just like touch base with him since you're like in the same building? Because she's also packing to like fly out here.
Sandy, I'm looking, but I can't see who's not muted. If you're not muted, please do so.
No worries. And then to better understand the community needs, obviously the more granular we can get, the new types of data, the more you can kind of move forward with that too. So, and then finally, checking my time here. Then finally, flexible and sustained funding. This has been a hot topic. I certainly some from the national level as well, but finding different ways to be flexible with the funding, considering some of the challenges, certainly with those of you who have federal funding, finding ways to be flexible and have that sustained funding. And I think sometimes you may find that you have money just for one project and the funding goes away. And so how can we find opportunities to kind of work collectively or leverage some other innovative approaches, perhaps to sustain some of that funding around those interventions? And so explore innovative funding models to expand the public health 3.0 style leadership and prevention initiatives. Leverage shared goals. So again, maybe you have some partners who are working on similar things that maybe they can do something that your organization cannot, but together you can really make more of an impact from that perspective. And that also goes the same with breaking funding silos. How can you work collectively to break those funding silos and work collectively to really make an impact on that. One thing that's really talked a lot about there, and maybe some of you on this call do that, but it's really looked at blended and braided funding of funds. So that's through different sources. And certainly finding ways to provide funding to support community level work to address social determinants of health. And I know that's been a challenge for some agencies just based on funding, but making more effort or where feasible to have more targeted funding towards really those upstream, those policy system environment, and really those things that we know really do impact the social determinants of health and those root causes. And then really looking at funding should really be identified to support that core infrastructure as well as that community level work to address the social determinants of health. And so that may take some structured review of your funding sources, you know, thinking innovative, thinking out of the box, but finding ways to kind of get outside of that traditional funding stream and find ways to be more flexible and help sustain some of that work as well. So those are the 5 components of Public Health 3.0. I'll certainly have some resources for you, so you'll be able to share some of that as well. Before we go on, I'm going to invite Brooke to share one more poll, and I just want to know if what I just talked about, if there's anything there that your organization is currently addressing. Or not, there's an option for that as well. Lots of partnerships, that's great. Okay. I'll give you a few more seconds here. All right. Well, if you had a chance to take it, we'll close the poll right now. Looks like a good chunk of you took it. So a lot of you are doing partnerships, which is great. Wonderful. Opportunities to explore how you can build that foundational infrastructure. The flexible and sustained funding, I'm sure, is one that's a little bit harder to kind of wrap your head around from that perspective, but perhaps there's some opportunity to leverage some of the recommendations from this model to address some of these areas that there are components that your agency is not currently addressing. So thanks for completing that. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about just some examples. So the reality is there's not a lot of examples in South Dakota from the sheer implementation piece, but we do have some things that we're doing within different departments of the programs of Department of Health. So the Office of Disease Prevention and Health Promotion recently merged two departments, and so we're really using this as a model to inform collaboration among staff and contractors. Really just started working through that lens earlier this year, but using that as a model to help focus on opportunities to collaborate across programs, across staff, really focused on building that foundational infrastructure to create that mission-based collaborative infrastructure. And so, so currently kind of just getting started with that, but finding opportunity to use the model to frame the work and the actions and opportunities to address some of those issues as well. And they're also using it through the chronic disease partner. So you'll learn more about that from today or next week, but many of you may be part of it, but we use that to guide our strategic planning process. And so we explored a lot of different models, but this was really appropriate for the work that you all do, we're all doing collectively, and you're really looking at to use it to enhance coordination of chronic disease prevention and health promotion activities among programs and partners statewide to really advance those Public Health 3.0 principles. And then again, really focus on addressing those key components of Public Health 3.0, as many of you probably were part of through engagement of our partners statewide. So certainly not something we want to do alone, but need to be in collaboration with all of you to help inform the work that you're all doing. And so that's how we're using it within South Dakota Department of Health right now. So more to come with that. I also wanted to share example. There's examples from different parts of the country. Now, Marion County Public Health Department is in Illinois. It's quite large, but it still has some really good examples I think might help you understand how it can be used. So they are in Indiana, and so they used they really looked to address inequities with COVID-19 testing by using surveillance data to place in community testing sites in areas with the highest incidence of disease. And so what they did was match positive case reports from private and public laboratories to EHR records and integrated them into a community dashboard. And so they really focused on using a data-driven approach to guide testing. They matched positive cases from the private and public laboratories to those EHR and integrated within that dashboard. And then they use those to establish the testing sites. And given the novel and dynamic nature of the pandemic, as noted from the literature, they based their resource allocation decisions on the assessments of multiple COVID-19 disease statistics and trends, rather than some predefined criteria. And so they really applied it to the community that they're working with. And so what they found is that testing site demographic data indicated that targeted testing reached populations with highest disease burden, suggesting that local health departments, now this is local, but we certainly have different opportunities across the state, but can effectively use surveillance data as a tool to address inequities. So a little bit about the implementation of this. So I thought some of this might be of interest to you. So they worked with their community partners to identify and address challenges related to COVID-19 testing. Certainly looking at your communities are non-native English speakers, so they address language and literacy barriers by translating testing materials into languages, primarily Spanish and Burmese. They established a Spanish language telephone registration system, and they worked with partners to develop mixed media messaging and advertisements about testing site locations. And so they sought to increase testing sites, really going to the community, not having them come to them, but going to the community. So on-site registration was available for those who aren't able to register through the internet. Keep in mind, even our rural state, there's a lot of people who don't have broadband access. They were unfamiliar, or if they were unfamiliar with online or call registration systems. English wasn't their first language. They didn't have access to public transportation. So it was considered when they were selecting these drive-through locations, and a walk-up option was available. And then they also made sites available on weekend hours to accommodate folks. So they really tried to make it attainable for folks. And so what they found, this is the COVID cases per 100,000 by race and ethnicity. So they found that new cases declined for focal racial groups after targeting these testing sites. And so you can see the difference in your population by race there too. But so that had emerged. So they saw their cases go down, and then their testing rates went up. And so they also found that their testing rates went up in the county relative to a lot of the populations noted on here. And so really what that meant is they went to the community, they went to the populations and tried to adapt to fit the barriers that they were facing, the unique needs of that population. And so what they talk about is the relevance to Public Health 3.0 is that it emphasized the use of electronic data to inform actions of public health agencies. And so we talk about that in Public Health 3.0. Intervention used a community-based integrated system designed to capture comprehensive data. The health departments can also use health systems' existing data infrastructure to inform their strategies for addressing health challenges, and especially of those who are disproportionately burdened, including Black and Brown communities. So they really used it as a framework through that data lens. And so there's a lot of other examples I could certainly share with you too. Now, again, this is urban, but you're still going into those populations that are disproportionately impacted. And so it gives an example how it can be used and has been used. So how do we move forward? Well, it's still a value. Public Health 3.0 is still value. There's been some articles and information that's emerged since COVID started around Public Health 3.0. It's still being promoted. I hear it being promoted nationwide to other organizations. And so it's still there, it's still relevant. Maybe just needs to be relaunched a little bit more explicitly, but there's certainly a value of that. What they have found, the people who developed that, most health agencies and organizations are just not configured to really deliver the goals of Public Health 3.0, really focus on equity and public health practice. So again, we go back to that foundational infrastructure, the integrated piece around those cultural competency perspective. They're from some of the national and federal mandates and funding. Public health struggles to make upgrades to its data and information technology. And certainly, I know there's been so much evolution since COVID started, but we know data is so important. And then some other opportunity really is to incorporate factors that shape those inequities in public health issues and provide public health agencies and organizations really that new path for making a difference in communities where there is that greatest need. So really adapting to the needs of that community. You've probably seen this too, but certainly we want to look at ways that we can move into that upstream perspective. I think we tend to be a little bit more in that midstream, and certainly that may be tied to funding streams, you know, other factors within that perspective. But this figure really depicts the nation's investment in healthcare spending. And so if we see as downstream investments are put in, we're seeing less impact in that community. And so we know the more impact we can make is if we go that midstream and really arguably that upstream, which sometimes is the harder piece to do, but certainly gives you that lens to see how we kind of move forward with that. And really focusing on those social terms of health, as Public Health 3.0 talks about, improving community conditions and really identifying those community-based approaches that we can do to move forward with that. And I didn't realize we had the same type of slide. So Sarah already talked about this, but reinforce what Sarah talked about in her presentation. A really important piece of Public Health 3.0 is that meaningful community engagement. So I won't reiterate what Sarah talked about, but just a good reflection on the different stages that you may be in and opportunities to kind of elevate the work that you're doing to really feed into building that chief health strategist, engaging that community in that perspective, and really improving the social terms of health. And then finally, I just, I don't even know if I have time, Brooks, maybe we won't show it.
You have 15 minutes, Sandy.
Oh,
So if you
I'm
want to
talking
show it, you
fast.
certainly can.
I don't know if I have to have my computer set up to do the audio.
When you choose share screen, in the lower left-hand corner, there's a box. So you might want to stop share and then share again. And you click share my audio or something like that.
Okay, let's see. Oh. Let's see if we get this to work.
We still see your slides, Sandy.
Huh. Thank you.
Could hear the audio.
Oh, you can. Perfect. All right. Okay, can we see this?
Nope. Now we can.
Perfect. And you can hear it. All right. So this is glad this works. So this is from Health and Human Services. This is their Healthy People 2030. And so they're a big I guess I would say author and driver of the social terms of health platform. And so they have things they update every year. And so I thought this would be a good way to end this, to kind of give you a highlight of where they're looking at from that lens too. And so Brooke, tell me if this doesn't work.
At HHS, we define the social determinants of health as the conditions in the environments where people are born, live, learn, work, play, worship, and age. Social determinants affect our health, well-being, and contribute to health disparities and inequities as well. Healthy People, our nation's longest-running disease prevention and health promotion initiative, emphasizes addressing the social determinants of health to create environments that promote health and well-being for all. I'm Admiral Rachel Levine, Assistant Secretary for Health at the United States Department of Health and Human Services. Healthy People 2030 provides a framework for thinking about social determinants of health across 5 domains. Here are 5 social determinants of health. First, economic stability. People with steady employment are less likely to live in poverty and more likely to be healthy. By helping people earn steady incomes, we can achieve economic stability for all. Second, education, access, and quality. People with higher levels of education are more likely to be healthier and live longer. By helping students excel in school, we can improve educational access and quality. Third, healthcare access and quality. Many people in the United States are unable to get the healthcare services that they need. Increasing access to high quality healthcare services will ensure more individuals can attain their full potential for health and well-being. Fourth, neighborhood and built environment. Health and safety risks like high rates of violence and unsafe air or water impact health and quality of life. By creating safe communities, we can provide opportunities to promote playing and physical activity. And fifth, social and community context. Increasing relationships and interactions with family, friends, neighbors, and community members is beneficial to an individual's health and well-being. To learn more and see how others are working to address the social determinants of health across the nation, please visit healthypeople.org.
Okay.
Services. Social determinants of health. First, economic stability.
Okay, thank you for that. So thought that would just be a good way to end this, to highlight the where it's coming from the national level and kind of where that perspective is from the social determinants health lens. And so I have shared in my presentation, show you here, have some references there if you want to learn more about that, and then certainly you can get my contact information with that too. So with that, I would like to say thank you for listening and taking the time to learn about Public Health 3.0 and open it up for any questions or comments you have.
Thanks, Sandy. And everyone is muted, so if you would like to ask a question, please unmute yourself. Otherwise, you can put it in the chat and Kayla or myself will ask the question. I did put up my screen with the evaluation link, so please scan that with your camera. Sandy, there are no questions in the chat.
So I might pose a question since I'm used to asking the questions. If anyone's willing to share, anybody see any opportunity to address some of the components or things outlined today within your organization that maybe you're not? If anybody's willing to share.
Well, and Sandy, I can just start off here and you know, I'll talk a little bit about this when we're in person next week. Just talking about rolling out the new chronic disease state plan. And as Sandy mentioned, we utilize the Public Health 3.0 framework through that process. And so we're looking forward to partnering with you all on as far as implementation of that and utilizing this framework to further how we support you know, public health across our state, and working with you all and giving you tools and resources to help you do that. And so, you know, we're really looking forward to working with you all through our implementation of that new plan. So we're looking forward to kind of launching that at our in-person meeting next week.
I'll just take a minute to see if any others have comments. And yes, Sandy, thank you for providing the framework for Public Health 3.0 for everybody. I know there were quite a few people who probably heard that for the first time today.
Yeah, I will say, you know, I'm one that has obviously learned a lot about it over the last several months, but continue to learn new aspects of the framework and continue to think about how best to utilize it. And I think it was really helpful to hear the specific examples that Sandy provided, you know, with Marion County and how, you know, it could be, you know, how real life it could be applied to community work and what that looks like. And so these presentations will be posted on the website, correct, Brooke?
Yes, that is correct. The recording and the slides on the Good and Healthy SD website.
Perfect. So yeah, I definitely encourage folks that definitely, if this is your first time hearing it, it does take a little bit to kind of soak in and think about, and really need to kind of dig in a little bit to really understand the different components and how they kind of work together and what that looks like. So I definitely encourage everyone to do that when they have some time.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining today. We look forward to seeing you next week. And one last thank you to Sandy, Sarah, Emily, and Autumn for sharing their insights with us. Please complete the evaluation with the QR code that's on the screen, and I'll leave that up here just for a few minutes. Have a good day, everybody.